Let's jump right in. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a fascinating and, frankly, kind of terrifying real-world scenario. We're going to see exactly how a catastrophic AI failure proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that ethics aren't just nice-to-haves. They are literally non-negotiable engineering requirements. We'll be using a case study of a company called GovernGlobal to see what happens when things go completely off the rails, and more importantly, how you can architect your systems so they actually work right. To kick things off, wrap your head around this number, 847. That is the exact number of claims processed by GovernGlobal's brand new claims processing AI agent in just its first 3 days. They went live on a Tuesday, and by Friday, the whole shebang was abruptly shut down. Just a complete halt. Why? Well, a data analyst doing a routine review spotted something incredibly wrong with how the AI was making decisions on those 847 claims. A statistical analysis revealed this horrifying pattern. Applicants over the age of 65 were being denied at 3 times the rate of younger applicants. And this was not just random noise, either. The AI had flawlessly learned to replicate the historical age bias of the human adjudicators who came before it, and it was doing it at a massive scale. The underlying training data had hidden biases, and the AI just soaked them up and amplified them with absolute, unhesitating consistency. Section 1. When AI fails real people. See, when AI fails real people, the stakes are just incredibly high. This disaster shows exactly why we absolutely must design systems with strict governance to prevent real human harm, not to mention massive regulatory violations. So to keep your build safe, we look to frameworks like Microsoft's 6 responsible AI principles. We've got fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security, inclusiveness, transparency, and accountability. Microsoft set these up not as some kind of shiny corporate decoration, but as the core foundational engineering framework to stop those catastrophic deployment failures. If GovernGlobal had treated these as hard prerequisites, that frantic Friday shutdown never would have happened. Let's talk about fairness for a second. When you're dealing with equitable outcomes, you have to avoid this really common trap. A failed fairness assessment blocks deployment completely. Period. It can never, ever be treated as a quick post-launch patch. You literally can't just launch and say, oh, well, we'll just monitor the bias as we go. Because every single day a biased agent is operating in production, you are actively committing regulatory violations. It is a strict deployment blocker. Next up is reliability and safety. Imagine an AI HR agent completely hallucinating a fake company policy just because an employee phrased a question uniquely. It happens. To prevent issues like that, you have to engineer reliability from the ground up through rigorous, comprehensive regression testing. You also need continuous production monitoring and, crucially, calibrated guardrails for safe fallbacks. Basically, your AI needs to know how to safely admit when it just doesn't know the answer. Okay, moving to privacy and security, especially when we're talking about protected health information, or PHI. The rules here are totally unforgiving. For privacy, your agent has to restrict data access to the absolute minimum necessary. You do this using ephemeral memory, meaning those PHI conversations aren't stored persistently unless explicitly required. And you absolutely need mandatory OBO, or on behalf of identity permissions. The AI should only ever pull the exact patient data that the specific human user is legally allowed to see. Then there's inclusiveness. GovernGlobal initially built a text-only patient intake agent, totally forgetting about elderly patients who might rely on screen readers or non-English speakers. To build inclusively, like they eventually did by adding those features, you have to constantly ask yourself during design reviews, who does this not work for, and is that acceptable? And let's be real, the answer to that second part should pretty much always be no. Which brings us to transparency. There's a big misconception here. Transparency is not about handing over complex mathematical model weights or backend code to a user. In reality, it's about ensuring an applicant knows exactly why a system made a specific recommendation about their claim. If an action affects a person, they are entitled to a meaningful, human-readable explanation of that decision. Our final principle is accountability. Never fall into the trap of letting an AI autonomously write to a patient record just because it has a high confidence score. That is a massive violation. Accountability demands a human-in-the-loop review for high-impact actions. It's totally fine for the AI to draft a clinical record update, sure, but a qualified human has to review it and click approve. AI redistributes the cognitive load, it does not eliminate human responsibility. Part 2. The 3 layers of HIPAA. Now let's raise the stakes and dive into strict legal frameworks. Failing to understand the three distinct layers of HIPAA compliance is a massive architectural mistake that catches a lot of developers off guard. It is definitely not a simple yes or no checkbox. While Microsoft handles the compliant cloud infrastructure at Layer 1 through their Business Associate Agreement, you are entirely responsible for Layer 2. That means engineering the application safeguards, like on behalf of identity and human in the loop. And crucially, you're on the hook for Layer 3, maintaining granular data-level audit logs, tracking exactly which row of data was accessed. And this brings us to a really hard platform ceiling. If your use case requires logging exactly who accessed a specific row of patient data to satisfy that Layer 3 requirement, Copilot Studio actually hits a wall. It cannot produce those logs. So you must step up and use Azure AI Foundry to implement that custom logging pipeline. Knowing this limitation early on is a game changer. It saves you from a total compliance teardown later down the line. Section 3. Navigating the EU AI Act. Shifting gears from healthcare in the US to global deployment, international law enforces its own mandatory governance requirements. The EU AI Act categorizes systems by risk. If you're designing an agent that touches employment decisions, benefits eligibility, credit assessments, health systems, or access to essential services in Europe, it is legally classified as high risk. And this isn't just a label to slap on a README file. It requires mandatory conformity assessments, extensive technical documentation, and rigorous human oversight before you can even think about launching. Part 4. Grounding governance rules. Finally, let's explore something that catches even the best engineers out. Even the most perfectly designed, totally bias-free AI can still become a dangerous liability if you neglect governing the ground truth your AI actually relies on. Think about the lifecycle of the documents you feed your system. You absolutely must implement a strict lifecycle where documents get a freshness check. The second they pass their defined retention window, they must be flagged and physically rejected from the AI's active production index. Because here is the brutal truth. Stale data is a governance failure. It's not a tuning problem. An AI dispensing outdated medical or policy advice because nobody bothered to govern the document index is a critical failure, and it causes real-world harm. The AI is going to sound perfectly confident because it's reading a real document. It just has no idea that the policy actually changed 3 years ago. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to look at your current enterprise solutions and ask yourself this critical question before your code ever reaches the real world. Your AI sounds confident, but is it compliant? Who is governing your ground truth? Make absolutely sure you have the answers to these questions locked into your engineering requirements from day one. Thanks for exploring these crucial principles with me, and keep building responsibly.